Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today I am going to be showing you a very, very, very interesting new deck. It's Magcargo. Just Magcargo, nothing else but Magcargo, essentially. It's actually just done really, really well in Japan. It was tweeted out by Shaman Mochi over on Twitter, although shout out to @code_64_X, who did put me into this, showed me that this was a thing. And essentially, this is just a deck that went and won in Japan. And it's a deck that I've suggested using in my podcasts and videos, but it's not one that I suggest many other people were taking particularly seriously. It's just straight Magcargo. Now, we've just had Celestial Storm coming out. Some of these cards are going to be waiting till Lost Thunder until they're released, but remember, in the past, people have been saying things like, come on, Wassy, you can't trust Japanese tournament results. They're playing a different format. Well, not anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They're playing Sun and Moon On. We're going to be playing Sun and Moon On. This deck will just be able to be translated into our format as soon as these cards come out, and I, for one, am very excited. So we need to start off by looking at the two Magcargo, who, given that this is essentially Quad Magcargo, are at the heart of the deck. Now, the non-GX Magcargo just came out in Celestial Storm, and it's kind of a reprint of the one from EX Deoxys, and what it essentially says you can do is once during your turn, search your deck for any card and put it on top. That sounds pretty nice to me. Now, it's got an attack, but it's not one you should really entertain using. 50 for free energy isn't good, don't worry your pretty little heads about it. It's all about the ability. Now, we're going to use it with the other Magcargo, more on that in a moment, but this is consistency. If you've got a way to draw a card this turn, you can get any card you like from your deck into your hand, but even if you don't, you can fix your top deck for next turn. And in a format where people aren't playing N, because it's rotated, and where Judge is legal but not that many people are playing it, when you set your top deck with Magcargo, it's more likely to stay around. And then we get to Magcargo GX. I'm just going to say at the beginning, all of our translations which are not from English released cards come from the lovely David Hockman over at Limitless TCG. And there's several things we like about Magcargo GX. I've done videos about it, I will pop a link in the description. The ability says, once during your turn, you may discard the top card of your deck. If it's a basic energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. So of course, this combos beautifully with the other Magcargo. You use a Celestial Storm non-GX to put an energy to the top of your deck. Then when you use this ability, you're going to hit an energy. You've just put it on top. So that's giving you guaranteed energy acceleration throughout the game. Then you've got the attack, which will be the attack you're using for the vast majority of turns. Fire, colorless, 50 damage. Discard any amount of basic energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 50 more for each energy discarded in this way. And this hits the numbers absolutely beautifully. Because if you put free energy on and discard it, then you're doing 200 damage, which is enough to KO something like a Buzzwole. Or if you add a choice band, you're doing 230, which is enough to KO something like a Gardevoir. And if you only discard 2 energy, but you use a choice band, then you're doing 180, and stuff like a Tapu Lele or a Rayquaza are being KO'd in one hit here. This hits the numbers beautifully, and essentially here you've got two choices. You either discard 2 energy to get stuff like Rayquaza, and then 1 Magcargo ability, 1 attachment for the turn and you're rolling, or you discard all 3 energy to really get the big boys, but that does force you into needing 2 Magcargo and your energy attachment for the turn, which is getting a little bit awkward. We've then got the GX attack here, which just says discard the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck. Now, the deck list we have here, which is the one that was tweeted out as a winning list in Japan, doesn't have any other possible GX attacks. So at some point during the game, you're just going to discard the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck. Maybe you do this early, and you get to discard something like your opponent's double colourless energy, bearing in mind special charge is gone, so they're not going to be able to recover it. Maybe you do this in the late game and actually force them to deck out. Either way, your opponent has to, in the early game, get set up as fast as they can, so you don't discard their resources, but also make sure they don't use too many resources too quickly for fear of being decked out in the late game. It's a great GX attack, but the threat of it can force your opponent into some horrible decisions. Go too fast, you might get decked out. Go too slow, you might lose good resources. And the thing I love is that every other Pokemon in this deck provides an amazing purpose and a huge boost to the deck. So we don't actually play any Tapu Lele here, which seems at first glance like that might be a little bit weird, but it's not actually that big of a deal because you've got so much consistency in this deck that you can actually afford to play no Tapu Lele, which does actually make it a fair budget deck. But we play 2 Oranguru here. Why do we play 2 Oranguru? Because it's got an ability that lets you draw until you got 3 cards in your hand. Firstly, it's consistency. Secondly, you need this with Magcargo. If you can get down to 2 cards in your hand, Magcargo puts whatever card you want on top of your deck, Oranguru draws it, and you don't want Tapu Lele on your bench. You want your only GX to be Magcargo. You haven't got time for Tapu Lele. Ain't nobody got time for that. You got so much consistency with Oranguru and Magcargo here, you don't really need it. But we also see a pair of Prism Stars. Ditto Prism Star works here beautifully. It's one of the uses we saw for it in the video I did about it, link in the description. You really want to play Magcargo, but you can only play 4 Slugma, even though you could potentially play 4 of the non-GX and 4 of the GX. How do you get a 5th Slugma? Ditto. Ditto's ability lets it evolve into any stage 1. So as long as it doesn't get KO'd the turn after you put it down, because you've got to have it down for a turn to evolve it, then you've basically got a 5th Slugma here, meaning you can have 2 of the non-GX, 3 of the GX Magcargo. That is going to help your setup immensely as you go through the game. And we see 1 Victini Prism Star. Now, on a personal level, this makes me very happy, because I am very much of the opinion that Victini Prism Star should be a one-of in every deck that plays fire energy or indeed counter energy. Victini Prism Star for 2 fire energy, but then you need to remember that you've got Magcargo GX, so you can easily get this rolling in 1 turn, does 20 damage for each basic energy in your discard pile, and then you shuffle them back into your deck. Firstly, this is going to be a powerful attack which should get you a KO with a non-GX single prize Pokemon. Secondly, you get all your energy back in the deck, and remember you need the energy in the deck to attack with Magcargo. Magcargo, you want to get the energy in the deck, attach it with the ability, discard it when you attack, and then get it back into the deck. Victini is a great way of getting it back into the deck. Now, in terms of energy here, obviously you just play basic fire. There's actually 13 in this particular list, and I have no problem with this because, well, this actually gives you a decent chance to hit one if you have to do a blind Magcargo discard. Not something I'd recommend because you might end up discarding your Ditto, but it's an option if you're really stuck. And it just means you're going to draw into the energy when you need them. Now, in terms of the trainer lines here, everything is just to back up what we've said about the deck. So you see, in terms of supporters, there's 4 Lily. We don't often see very many Lily. It's kind of a one-off, so you can search it out with Tapu Lele on turn 1, where you draw till 8 cards in hand, whereas the rest of the game you draw till 6. But this is a deck where you're using Magcargo, so you're fixing your top deck, and if you're lucky you might be able to fix 2 top decks by having 2 Magcargo out. So that means that a card like Lily that might only draw you 2 cards is perfect because you're getting the ones you want. The reason we use it over something like How is because there's still those turns where you're going to be able to draw many cards, and if you look at this deck, it's a deck that plays what it has very quickly, which is how it can use a Oranguru that draws till you got 3 cards in hand, meaning Lily will usually be better than How. Then we see 4 copies of Cynthia, because it's just the best supporter in the format. 4 copies of Guzma to take out bench Pokemon, because even though you should be able to KO anything with Magcargo, it's still nice to be able to pick your KO. And let's face it, if you're drawing cards with Magcargo and Oranguru, you can afford to play Guzma more often than you would in other decks. But then we see a couple of strange choices. There's actually 2 Apricorn Maker in this deck. Why are there possibly 2 Apricorn Maker in this deck? Why did that seem like a good idea? The answer is because you're playing a lot of ball cards, 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball. And remember, we're not playing any Tapu Lele in this deck. What we want is just to get your Magcargo out and your Oranguru out. So actually, having an Apricorn Maker, you can search out a Slugma and an Oranguru and get rolling. It's a weird choice, but in a deck like this, it actually works beautifully, not to mention that as with any other card in this deck, it can be searched with Magcargo, making it even more potent. And we see 2 copies of Mallow. Now initially some of you might be thinking, well hang on a second Wassy, why would you play Mallow, search any 2 cards and put them on top of your deck, in a deck where you're playing Magcargo, which does the same thing, although only 1 card at a time? And the answer is for the early game and for turns when you don't have Magcargo. You're still playing Oranguru. You should still be able to draw cards every turn. Mallow's great in the same way that Magcargo's great. And okay, when you've got 2 Magcargo on the field, maybe you don't need this. But you know what? And to be fair, you could still play this and then play 2 Slugma, and if you can draw 4 cards with Oranguru, you can actually draw all 4 of them. But generally speaking, this is an alternative where you don't have it rolling. And then there is 1 copy of Judge, because it's still decent disruption, and you can search it out with Magcargo, making it a nice little option. Like I said, we got 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, because if you're not playing Tapu Lele, you have got to get rolling very, very quickly. 3 copies of Choice Band, because you need to do extra damage, and like I showed you earlier, it's brilliant here at helping you hit the numbers. 2 copies of Switch, because you really don't want your Magcargo that should be on the bench or your Oranguru that should be on the bench in the active. And I know I keep saying this, but it's a really important point. You can play lower counts of some of these cards, because between Mallow and Magcargo, you should really be able to find them when you need them. 2 copies of Rescue Stretcher, because you really need to be able to recover your Slugma and Magcargo. You don't really have any backup attackers other than your 1 Victini. And then you've got 1 copy of Energy Retrieval, which puts energy into your hand. Very important, because you might need to attach it this turn. And then 1 copy of Energy Recycler, which, and I said it in my Tapu Bulu video, which was dumb, it's not rotating out. It was in Guardians Rising, because it gets your energy back into your deck. Ideally, you use Victini Prism Star to get all of your energy back, but this will get 5 of them, which is better than nothing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a Magcargo deck that's been winning in Japan. It's not one that I expected to see anytime soon, but I am delighted. I think it's a good deck, and it seems like one that's got a lot of potential when it comes over here. Plus, it plays 0 Tapu Lele, so that's going to make it cheaper. And remember, OK, Japan is a set ahead of us, but they're playing in the same format, so as soon as Lost Thunder comes out, this is entirely up for grabs. So now it's over to you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to hear in the comment section what you think of this deck. If you think it's viable, go nuts, but remember the rule, be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do so. And do check out my other channel, Wassy Plays. There's Dragon Ball Super TCG videos, there's video game videos, and we've started covering the Transformers TCG, which looks like a lot of fun. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.